Okay. Good morning, brothers and sisters. Peace be with you all. And it is the last Sunday of the month. It's June 28th. We are past the halfway point of 2026, well past the halfway point. And it seems like it's been just a blink. There's a lot going on nowadays. The World Cup is happening. I think there's a game later today. So there's a lot going on. So today we're going to come to Matthew chapter 17. Maybe before we begin, can we flip the slide and let's read a couple of verses together. This is Matthew 17, verse 1 and 2, to just set the context of the passage this morning. Can we read this together?
After 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, the brother of James, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. There he was transfigured before them. His face shone like sun, and his clothes became as white as the light.
And the next slide, can we read this as well?
While he was still speaking, a bright cloud covered them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him."
So near the end of Jesus' ministry, he took 3 of the disciples, Peter, James, and John, up to a high mountain, the Mount of Transfiguration, the exact coordinates of which we're uncertain of. But the Lord was transfigured or transformed. It was one of the more glorious moments on earth. A sense of the essence of divinity was put down on that mountain when God himself came and acknowledged, "This is my son." And then we come to today's passage, which happens directly after this proclamation here. So let us, before we read this, I would invite you to greet someone, greet your neighbor, say hello, and also I would like to see if you can discuss or come up with an experience that you've had where you felt like you had the knowledge to do something, but then when you put it into practice, it kind of fell flat. Maybe you've had one of those experiences. So maybe we'll take a minute to greet your neighbor and then see if you have any one of those experiences you can share with them. No, it's fine. I just here you can't really see that well. Yeah, the angle's not good. Okay, maybe we can wrap up your thoughts. Okay, I wonder, I'm not going to make you share, but maybe keep that experience in the back of your mind as we read the passage. So maybe we can read together Matthew chapter 17, we have verses 14 to 18. Maybe we can have the brothers read first and then alternating with the sisters.
When they came to the crowd,
A man approached Jesus and knelt before them.
Lord, have mercy. I brought him
To your disciples, but they could not heal him.
Jesus rebuked the demon,
And it came out of the boy, and he was healed at that moment. Okay, next slide. And then can we read this as well in the same manner? So sisters first.
Then the disciples came to Jesus in private and asked, "Why couldn't we drive it out?"
He replied, "Because you have so little faith. Truly, I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you."
Okay. Can we go back to we'll put up the first set of verses from 14. So when they came to the crowd, just before this, as we read, they were on the Mount of Transfiguration. We had the glory of God telling basically the whole human race that this is my son. And then immediately after that, we see Jesus and his disciples coming down, and what befalls them? The quintessential human experience, suffering. A lot of suffering, especially at the hands of this father and son. The father clearly quite distraught at the fact that his son is falling into the fire and the water. This reminds me of a show that I watched recently. It's called Outlast on Netflix, and they were in this survival situation, and then randomly this person who seemed like he was fine just fell face forward into the fire, got tons of burns, and then had to be shipped out, and he couldn't do the game anymore. There was no apparent reason for it, but looks like this son was suffering something similar at the cost of, or at the behest of demons, and it had some epileptic symptoms. So right after, like we can contrast here the high position of the Lord at the Mount of Transfiguration, and then coming down from that high place to deal with the suffering and the sins of man. And that is a microcosm of what the Lord has done for all of us. And it's no different than what is happening here. I would say that it's very much a human experience. We're not meant to be ascetic. We're not meant to stand up on a high mountain, be a hermit, and devote our entire being to what we perceive as spirituality. The human experience necessarily is connections with other people. And in this experience, there's suffering that can come. But we see in this chapter that regardless of what it was, where he was, the Lord comes down to save and to help his people. And let's go to the second, or actually no, let's stay here. The second half of this passage that is interesting is it's not just the Lord who was trying to help the son, or not trying, who helped the son. You'd see here that the disciples also first tried to get out the demons. Verse 16 says, the Father testifies, "I brought my son to the disciples, but they could not heal him." And this experience of healing wasn't new for the disciples at the time. It's not like that they hadn't had this power or they hadn't healed other people before. It didn't work this time. And Jesus very clearly tells them why they weren't able to heal the demon or heal the boy from the demon. And that's in the next slides that we had just read. So can we read verses 20 and 21 again? Let's read it together.
He replied, because you have so little faith. Truly I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. But this kind does not go out except by prayer and fasting.
Jesus is very clear in this passage. Why could you not cast out the demon from the child? Why could you not heal this person? It's because you have so little faith. And that's an interesting statement because these are the disciples, right? These are people who have directly seen the miracles of the Lord. They've interacted with Jesus. They're learning his ministry. And they just went up to the Mount of Transfiguration with the Lord, who they saw and they heard. God said, "This is my son." So what basis do they have to say, or to have so little faith as Jesus describes here, right? The disciples should know that Jesus is the Son of God. They just heard it. They definitely have some faith in the ministry because they followed Jesus. They were his disciples. But in this specific instance, Jesus said they did not have enough faith. And he compares it to a mustard seed, which there's another comparison in the Bible of faith being as small as a mustard seed. The comparison is the seed starts very, very tiny and then grows into one of the biggest trees that there can be, depending on how much time you give it, et cetera, et cetera. The mustard seed is very small. So Jesus is saying here, if the disciples had faith as small, like the smallest amount of faith, then they could have healed the child. They could move a mountain and nothing will be impossible for you. So the question becomes, what kind of faith is the Lord talking about? Where are we placing our faith? So I asked you earlier to think about an experience that you had, because I kind of parallel this to the concept that, knowledge is not experience. You can have all the knowledge that you want, but sometimes that's just not going to cut it. You need to experience. You need to do something to gain that knowledge, kinesthetic learning. When I recall one of the times I was in law school and we had mock trials in first year. So this was the first time that they had put us in a setting where it was supposed to emulate you talking with a judge. And I was super confident. I was like, I'm made for this. This is everything that I've ever wanted to do. Not really, but I thought I was very confident. I prepared, because I was so confident, I prepared a basic script. I had my great arguments about what's the meaning, like religious freedom, section 2A of the charter. I had it all planned out. And then 30 seconds after I start, the fake judge asks me a question. The fake judge, I remember very clearly, the fake judge asked me, how would you define sincere faith? Because part of the test for whether you can take or you can say you're defended by the Charter on Religious Freedoms is if you have sincere faith. And then the fake religion at the time was about people putting on fake beards. So I thought it was ridiculous. But I remember I froze. It was awful. I had no idea how to answer his question of what's the definition? How would you define sincere faith? So I stumble through that. I say something that doesn't matter. And then I look at my script and I lose my way, because at that time I didn't know scripting out your entire thing was a bad idea. And this was a mock trial, so I had all my friends behind me. They were laughing. I couldn't see them, but they told me that it was the worst thing they'd seen, and it was a nightmare. But I came into it with a lot of head knowledge. I thought, this is the test for religious freedom. I got this point to say. I got this point to say. The judges are going to be, or the fake judges are going to be so impressed. I placed my faith in myself. It was incorrect. I crashed and I burned, but luckily it was a mock trial, so I never have to, I took it as a learning experience. Same with the disciples here. Who did they place, this is my interpretation of it, but who did they place their faith in when they came to save this child, right? Is it the Lord, or perhaps they placed their faith in themselves, in the person that they are, in being able to heal because they had done so before, maybe because, again, they had just come down from the mount where they experienced this great spiritual high, and then it gets put to the test immediately after that, and they crash and burn. And the Lord tells them that they have no faith at all. So perhaps that's why the disciples could not cure the child. The faith that we have, it can be as small as a mustard seed, but it has to be put in the right place. Who are we putting our faith in? If we really think about it, are we just saying we're putting our faith in God, or are we truly giving ourselves, giving our futures, giving our decisions to the Lord? Or is it just masked by our own confidence because of our experiences, because of what we've been doing? The disciples had all the knowledge, all the prep, all the experience, but something was still lacking to put that into practice to be able to heal, and that was faith. So may we take this as a reminder to put faith in the Lord, to put faith in the higher power who we know can definitely heal. Jesus had no problems at all with casting out this demon. So when we come to these experiences, may we think, who do we actually put our faith in? And then there's some other passages in this other sections in the passage, but I'll leave that to Peter.
Okay, yeah, praise the Lord. Thanks, Corey, for the sharing and the experience you shared with us. So I guess we can read the second part, and then we'll go back to this a bit. Let's read the next part. Oh, go next slide. Keep going. Yeah, let's read this together.
When they came together in Galilee, he said to them, "The Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men. They will kill him, and on the third day he will be raised to life." And the disciples were filled with grief. After Jesus and his disciples arrived at Capernaum, the collectors of the 2 drachma temple tax came to Peter and asked, "Doesn't your teacher pay the temple tax?"
Yes, he does,
he replied.
When Peter came into the house, Jesus was the first to speak. "What do you think, Simon?" he asked. "From whom do the kings of the earth collect duty and taxes? From their own children or from others?" "From others," Peter answered. "Then the children are exempt." Jesus said to him, "But so that we may not take offense, go to the lake and throw out your line. Take the first fish you catch, open its mouth, and you will find a 4 drachma coin. Take it and give it to them for my tax and yours." So we see in the second part as well, Jesus is, in a sense, training the disciples. He's giving them reminders, or actually the disciple Peter, giving him a reminder about who he actually is, right? And like Corey shared, when our theory, our knowledge comes into practice, when we start facing reality, things get a little shaky, right? Just like Peter. He knew what the right answer is, and we'll get back to this later, but he also stumbles and makes mistakes. So let's go next slide, and slide after. So we're just coming back to here again. So yeah, like Corey said, Jesus has just come down from the mountain of Transfiguration, and the first thing he meets is like this crowd, right, of people, and this man whose son is possessed by a demon. And in the Gospel of Luke, it also specifies that this is his only son, and also that he's been possessed since childhood, so for many years. Now, demon possession, it's something that we're not very familiar with, right? It's unfamiliar territory. We may think that, okay, that's something of the past. But if you're like me, I've heard stories of demon possession. I've never witnessed demon possession before, but I've heard many stories of those who have witnessed. And if those of you who remember Brother Dave Loudon from Winnipeg, the last time he came to share with us, I think it was last year or something like that, he shared about, the most recent time he came to share was about demon possession and how he actually witnessed demon being cast out. And also, I think even among us, Uncle Frank's not here, but I'll speak for him. But I remember Uncle Frank shared about his experience of someone who was close to him who was demon possessed back in Malaysia. And they were like, almost like acting like a wild animal, wild beast. Like their eyes were like wild beasts. So this is not something that we just hear about, but it's real. Demon possession is real. We might not face it on a daily basis, but it might be in other parts of the world or places where we don't encounter, but it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And it's not something of the past, right? Also, here, what demon possession is like, when you're possessed by a demon, it's suffering, right? It's not something great that's happening. The demon was causing the child to suffer so much. It was throwing him into the fire, into the water. And Jesus even spoke that demons, or Satan, our enemy, has come to kill, steal, and destroy. And this demon right here is destroying. Whenever you see demon possession, they're destroying the person they're possessing, right? But Jesus came here to give freedom. Jesus came here to release us from demons and give us life. And the demon might throw us into suffering, into the water, into the fire. But our God says that when you pass through the water, when you pass through the fire, I will be with you. So that's the contrast between the heart of a demon and the love of God. Demons filled with hatred, hate for God and hate for man. They want to destroy us. They're not our friends. God loves us so much. He is with us in our suffering, and he wants to free us. And here, one thing, when Jesus met the man, or he said, you unbelieving, when he heard about the things, he said, you unbelieving, perverse generation, right? Or faithless generation. They didn't have faith. And this you wasn't just pointed at the man, the father. It was a plural you. He's referring to everyone there. So there were scribes there. There was his disciples there. They were, obviously the scribes didn't believe in Jesus. And others who were witnessing saw the disciples failing. They didn't have faith. The disciples didn't have faith either. So Jesus is very distressed, right? And yeah, the same verse appears. So this is actually from the Gospel of Mark now. So I want to share this section with you because there's something that's, there's an interaction that's very special that's not described in the Matthew account. But in Mark, we see something very special between him and the Father. There's more conversations here. So let's read this together. You unbelieving generation, Jesus replied, how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy to me. So they brought him. When the Spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into a convulsion. He fell to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. Jesus asked the boy's father, how long has he been like this? From childhood, he answered. It has often thrown him into the fire and water to kill him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us. If you can, said Jesus, everything is possible for one who believes. Immediately the boy's father, I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. So there's a bit more here, and I think it's very worth sharing because we see that this father, initially, when he approached Jesus right here, he's like, if you can, do anything, right? Didn't have real faith in Jesus. We can say that it's more like when you just want to give it a shot, right? Like, it doesn't hurt to believe in God. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So okay, let me ask you, is that faith, right? Are you actually believing in God or just like, throwing it out there. If it works, it works. That's not really faith, right? If you think about it, that's just testing, like trial and error, right? Anyone can do that. So that's actually not the faith God is looking for, right? In James, it tells us that that's like someone who's double-minded, right? They're, either it works, it doesn't. If it doesn't, I'll just move on, right? But so in the similar way, the father is like, if you can't do anything, at this point, he's desperate. He just wants his son to be healed, to be, the demon get rid of, and anything works. If you can just like reduce the symptoms, or if you can just make things slightly better, anything, if you can help in any aspect, please. And Jesus was like, if you can, everything is possible for him who believes. The people there, the father, the disciples, the question in their mind is, if you can, if God can, or if he can't. Can he really do this, or can he not? That's not a problem for God. The real question that Jesus is asking, including you and me, is, do you believe or not? That's the real question. Because everything is possible for him, for the one who believes. Okay? You really have to have faith. And what happens next is so key and so precious. Pay attention to this. Immediately the boy's father exclaimed. Okay, so in other translations, this original word exclaimed isn't just shouting. He cried out loud. Or he actually was in tears. He was genuine in heart. He really wanted to believe. He really wanted to have that faith, in fact. But perhaps, that faith isn't that strong, right? He didn't have that faith to even imagine. There's times where we can't even imagine us moving a mountain or a very difficult thing in our life. Like, we can't even imagine it. For the father, his son has been possessed ever since childhood, like basically all his life. He can't even imagine how it will look like for his child to be healed. Like, I want to believe, but I just can't, right? I don't have that faith. He says, I do believe, but Lord, help me overcome my unbelief. And that's really precious, because we can have that same prayer. And Jesus did not rebuke the father for having this. He wasn't rebuking the father for having small faith. He wasn't refusing the father, like, that's not enough for me. Or like, come back when you have bigger faith, okay? I won't heal your son. No, this was enough for Jesus. And he healed the son. He cast out the demon. He listened to this prayer. I do believe. Help. And that's the same for us. Jesus isn't looking for perfect faith. And I think this is really crucial for all of us to understand. He's not looking for perfect faith. We will have seasons of doubt. We will have questions about the Lord, right? Even after many years of believing in the Lord, we might still have struggles with our faith. But as long as you can have faith, just a little bit, you can put your trust in Jesus and ask him to help you. This is the key here. You can ask him to help you in your unbelief. There was a season in my life, I've probably never shared this with many people, where I had a dark moment of doubt, where my whole faith was in question, where I was at a point where I questioned even the existence of God, right? But during that whole season, and it probably lasted almost several months, and it was a very dark season for me. Looking at other religions, looking at what my faith truly is about. But the whole time, even with my doubts, even with my unbelief, I still had that prayer to the Lord. God, I really want to believe in you. I still have that faith, but help me overcome that. And he does. He helped me overcome that season of doubt. Yes, that is the key here. Okay, so Jesus cast out that demon afterwards. Now the next part, we read it already, but I want to read it in Amplified. So the disciples now asked a question is, why couldn't we cast out the demon, right? And that's a valid question. And Jesus says, because of your little faith. And that faith is not just little in size. Actually, the Amplified tells it a bit more. It's your unbelief, right? You lack of trust. Like you lack faith and confidence in the power of God. For I assure you and most solemnly say to you that if you have living faith, the size of a mustard seed. So they didn't even have that small faith. But if you have a size of a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there. And if it is God's will, it will move. And nothing will be impossible for you. Yeah. Now, I know that here, Amplified, they usually kind of, in the brackets, they add their explanations, right? It's not in the original Bible, but a lot of times it's because of the context, and it does make sense, right? So I just wanted you to know that it's added here. So if it is God's will, it will move, because if you look at the rest of the Bible, it aligns, right? Because without this, sometimes we can misinterpret this verse, right, in other ways. And I'm going to show you that in the next slide. Okay, so faith is not manipulation, it's not manifestation, and it's not man. Now, I want to first, before I get into that, a mustard seed, it's probably one of the most tiniest seed in the whole world, okay? And yeah, you can probably barely see it, but that's all the faith God requires. So I actually brought a mustard seed, so Sunny has it. It's in a jar, and if you can, it's kind of hard to see it, but feel free, you can actually open the lid and take a look. Just don't take it out in case it drops and you lose it. So yeah, feel free to pass it around. And yeah, let's get into this. So that's the amount of faith that is required. But we might misinterpret this verse and think that, okay, nothing will be impossible for you as long as you have faith. Okay, so not manipulation. So back to that Amplified version, it says, if it is God's will, then it will move, right? Because if it's not God's will, God is not going to answer, right? We might want a mountain to move, or we might have such faith that the mountain can move, but what's the point of moving a mountain? What's the point of, it's not manipulating the geographies, the physical geologies, right? It's senseless. It's, unless you want to see a better sunset or something, you want to move this mountain. But God is not going to answer that kind of prayer, right? It has to be according to His will. We're not manipulating God by our faith. We're not asking God to do what we want, to listen to our bidding. So that's not what faith is. It's not manipulation. But instead, faith is a response to God's revelation, meaning that what He has revealed in His promises, in what He promised to do, and things that He wants us to obey, and we need the strength for it, that's when faith is required, when we need that faith to trust in God. Second, it's not manifestation. So I don't know if you heard this term before, manifestation. It's basically meaning an idea where you can manifest what your deepest desires into reality. Say, you want to become a billionaire, then right now, I'm going to live like a billionaire, or I'm going to put all my thoughts, my energy into it, and then one day it's going to manifest. It's going to become that. Or I really want a spouse, and I'm going to manifest that spouse into my life. So that's definitely not what faith is. That's wishful thinking, and you can't wish things into existence. And even among Christian circles, this has kind of bleeded in. There was this word of faith movement in the past. I'm not sure those who heard of it before or remember it. But essentially, it's the same line of thinking where you can have enough faith and believe that God will do anything for you. It's called you name it and you claim it. And that's dangerous. That's not what faith is. And finally, faith is not man. Yes, okay. So oftentimes, we hear a lot of times believe in yourself, have self-confidence, right? Don't don't give up on yourself, and these are all positive thinking, but that's not what Jesus is saying. It's not positive thinking. Faith is not a psychological power where you become confident and you start doing the things you want. And also, Jesus isn't saying to believe harder. It's not about your faith. or perform better, right? Instead, he says, if your faith is as small as that mustard seed, that's that mustard seed that you were holding in your palm. If you compare that to a mountain, right, the size is disproportionate. But Jesus, on the contrary, says, if you have that kind of faith, you can do the impossible, right? And in the Amplified, it says living faith. So it's not, as Corey said, it's not something we just know about. That's dead knowledge. We have to experience it. It has to be living. Where it's not the size of our faith that matters, but who we place our faith on. It's not how great our faith is, but how great our God is. Okay. So all this to say, going back here, is that, faith, as long as it's small mustard seed, he also says that this kind does not go out except by prayer and fasting, which means that the disciples probably didn't even pray, right? Which means they didn't, so similar to what we saw, they trusted and relied on themselves, right? They didn't go to the Lord of prayer, right? They based their casting out demons on their own experience. Because in the past, like Corey mentioned, when we read earlier, they were able to cast out demons, right? And they were very happy that they did, but in this case, they faced a new situation where they couldn't. And so every time we need to rely on the Lord. Every time we need to not rely on ourselves. And this, here is a lesson for the disciples. Like Corey, I really liked the experience he shared about the mock training, or the mock training for the court. In a similar case, here Jesus is like training the disciples, like giving them, he knows he has a short time left before he has to go, right? So he's very urgent and wants the disciples, and that's why he was crying out, faithless generation. But at the same time, God is still very patient with us, and still he gives us these lessons, these teaching moments. And as we'll see in the next passage as well, with Peter, he gives another lesson, right? So when they returned to Capernaum, there were tax collectors of the temple tax who asked Peter, doesn't your teacher pay the temple tax? And Peter says, yes, he does. Let's go back. So I just want to kind of give some context here. So temple tax is like an annual tax in the temple. It's not legally enforced, so they don't have to pay it. But the money is used to repair the temple. It's kind of like our tithing today, where the money is used for the temple maintenance and everything, right? And it's kind of expected that every Jew would give the temple tax. And if you didn't, then you get all the pressure. So in this case, Peter thinks, well, of course, my teacher pays the tax, right? But when he goes back home, where Jesus is, Jesus tells him that, Jesus was the first to speak to him, even before Peter even said that word. He says, whom do the kings of the earth collect duty and taxes? From their children or from others? And we see that Jesus was making a point that he doesn't have to pay the tax. He is the Son of God, right? God himself doesn't have to pay taxes for his own temple, right? So that point came across. It was a lesson for Peter. And oftentimes, as well, we may laugh at Peter. We may think, well, Peter, he should know better, right? Earlier on the mountain, he heard the revelation, this is my son, right? This is the Son of the living God. He even confessed with his own mouth. He received that revelation. Yet when he goes back to everyday situation, his mind gets flogged or cloudy, and he just answers what he wants. And that's like many of us too. We may have, in the meetings, or even when we're one-on-one praying with God, we may be very clear about who God is, about everything about Jesus, and we may have such an intimate relationship. But once we start going back, when we open our eyes and start working or going about our day-to-day, it's like we forget everything, right? The theory goes back, falls flat, so to say. But that's why we need constant reminders and constant training. The Lord uses this as a teaching moment for Peter. And also, I want to ask you guys a question, is what did Peter do wrong here? Or if we kind of reverse back in time, if you were Peter, what would you have said to the tax collectors? Would you have said no, he doesn't pay the tax? Is that the correct answer? That would also, yes, it's correct, but then it also causes them to question, like, how come your teacher doesn't pay tax, right? And all that sort. What should Peter have done? Well, he should have asked the Lord instead of spoken on his behalf. Jesus was in the house the whole time. And Jesus is in our heart as well. Whenever we face a question, whenever we face a situation, let's not rely on ourselves. Is our first response to ask the Lord, or is it to just speak on his behalf? And when Peter returned, Jesus was the first to speak to him and correct him. Have you guys ever experienced, after a situation has passed, that the Lord was the first to speak to you? I know I have. I know that I've noticed that a lot of times when I've been given an opportunity to share the gospel with someone, right? I'm talking about Jesus with them. I'm telling them about the Lord and salvation and doing my best. And after the conversation is done, I'm kind of like replaying it in my mind and thinking, and I hear, I didn't ask the Lord for help. It was all me. Like, why didn't I do that? It's kind of like this. And we need that reminder. Like, if we're speaking on behalf of Jesus, we need to ask Jesus first. I think if I did that, I'm imagining how the conversation would have turned much differently. But Jesus has so much patience. He has so much patience with Peter, with all of us. And we can see Jesus is so kind. He's the most kind and the most loving, because Jesus doesn't rebuke Peter for this. He doesn't, reprimand him, but he just gently corrects him. And in fact, later he tells Peter to go out and fish. The first fish you'll catch will have enough money for the tax. Not just for Jesus himself, but he also covers it for Peter. And that's the love of our Lord. He thinks about us, right? The money is going to give it to them for my tax and yours. And we might think this later miracle is not as impressive. It's a very simple miracle with the fish and a coin. But actually, it's outstanding. It's like, if you really think about it, it's miraculous, because it means the Lord knows everything. He knows, like, how did that coin, first of all, get in? He has to make sure that coin gets into the fish's mouth. And when Peter goes out to fish, it has to be just the right time for that one fish that has a coin to get caught. What are the probability of that happening, right? And notice that he tells him it's the first fish you catch. It's not just, because Peter's used to catching with a net, right? He can grab a bunch of fish, and Jesus could have like, okay, you can check each fish, and one of them will have a coin, right? Like many fish will increase the probability. Not that the probability was high anyways, but like at least there's more fish. But here he's saying the first fish, and if you studied like combinatorics, when there's order involved, it's permutation, and there's way less. Basically I'm trying to say it's impossible, right? The chance of this happening is impossible. Yet this is what the Lord has done, and it shows us that even in these simple, everyday things, like catching fish, Peter was a fisherman, right? Fish is something he sees on a daily basis. Yet even in his everyday, normal tasks, there is a miracle. There is something extraordinary. And even with us, when we have our faith in Jesus, we might not be facing very extraordinary things, but even in our everyday things, our normal day-to-day things, it can be extraordinary. And so whether you're facing a mountain in your life today, be it financial crisis or family issues or something that, I don't know, something that maybe you've been going through for a very long time and maybe think it's impossible by now, you can bring it to the Lord. Whether it's a season of doubt, you might be struggling with your faith, or a sin in your life that you find it insurmountable. Remember, you just need the size of a mustard seed faith. You can ask the Lord, help my unbelief. Because when you take one step towards the Lord, just one step, he takes 1,000,000 towards you. You don't need perfect faith. Many people think that I need to be fully confident of what I believe, especially those who haven't believed Jesus yet. They always think I need to understand every single detail. I need to read the whole Bible. I need to make sure all the arguments about God are resolved in my head and every question answered. That's not required. You can have a little faith. And even after you believe, for many of us, we still struggle with questions. We still will have many questions. You'll never reach a point where you answer all the questions. But when you have a mustard seed faith, it's living and it grows. And that's all God needs. When you're struggling with faith, when you're facing doubts, just keep your faith in Jesus and he can help you overcome all things. And yeah, I want to end with what we read in the beginning, is that may we have, even in our everyday life, even things we might find normal, like taxes, for example. You might think everyone pays taxes. Why do we need to bring that to the Lord? In this case, he should have. We can bring anything to the Lord, or doubts, or struggles, everyday things, even if we're not struggling. Bring them to the Lord. May he have his place in our heart. Just like on the mountain where he revealed to us, the Father revealed to us, this is my Son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him. Amen.
I actually read these verses earlier this week in one of my devotionals about the Father in Mark 9. And Jesus heals his son. He doesn't wait for this guy to have more faith. He doesn't wait for him to read the Bible more, go to meetings more, go to Bible study more. But this guy just prays and says, Lord, I believe. Help me with my unbelief. So some of us have been saved for many years. We still doubt, is God working in my life? Is he still leading me where I'm supposed to go? He put me in certain situations, and am I going to get out? If God's real, would I have more money? Would my relationships, my family, my kids, would that be better? But yeah, God doesn't wait for us to have our faith grow before he moves. In 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 13, it says, if we are faithless, he remains faithful. He cannot deny himself. So even when we don't believe, God's working. We just have to have that little faith. When the thief was on the cross, he didn't read the Bible so many times. He didn't know God for many years. He didn't pursue God. He didn't go to church meetings. He didn't do all these things. Just reading more doesn't mean your faith will grow. You just have to have that tiny bit of faith for God to work.
Maybe we'll end the meeting with some prayer.
Lord, we thank you for the word